Well, welcome to today's hearing. Entering foster care is a life-changing experience for children. Foster children are faced with a dizzying array of changes that are anything but normal, as all of you know. They are separated from their parents. They are often sent to live with a family they have never met. They may start attending a new school, have to make new friends, and make new efforts to participate in sports and other activities they previously took for granted. On top of all this change, we know some children welfare policies have the unintended effect of making life even harder for children. Rules may keep them from spending time with friends, participating in sports, and even getting a driver's license or finding a summer job. For example, Ryan Cummings from my home state of Washington wasn't able to get a driver's license while in foster care. He missed going on vacation with his foster family because the rules didn't allow him to travel. Georgiana Rodriguez from Florida couldn't play in the high school marching band. John Paul Horn from California needed to save money before his 18th birthday when he would be on his own, but his group foster home rules initially blocked him from being able to obtain a job. Such foster youth often speak of living in a separate world, where they are isolated from the community around them, making it that much harder for them to succeed, and why we clearly need to make sure children are safe while in foster care. These are examples that highlight how in some areas policymakers have gone too far in creating that separate world for these kids. Now the tide seems to be turning in some areas of the country. In recent years, federal and state reforms have tried to allow more children to stay safely in their own homes or be adopted instead of spending year after year in foster care. For children who must enter foster care, federal reforms have stressed helping children in their own school whenever possible. Some states have also taken on this issue directly. In 2004, California amended their laws to eliminate unnecessary restrictions on the activities of foster youth and provide foster parents more flexibility to make responsible decisions. In 2011, foster youth in Washington State, working with Mockingbird Society, highlighted this issue. And now my state is a working group to develop ways to make improvements. And as we will hear today, states might examine a law Florida enacted just this year that is designed to ensure foster youth are treated more like every other child. This law will allow foster youth more freedom to participate in age-appropriate activities like sports, sleepovers with friends, and getting a driver's license. And we're going to review those efforts today. In the process, we will learn what is being done to improve the lives of foster youth and how we can work together to better ensure that foster kids can successfully grow and develop like other children. That's our responsibility, and we welcome all of today's witnesses to help us achieve that goal. And some of you on the panel may not know my background, but I want to share this very quickly. I was in law enforcement for 33 years before I ended up here in Congress, so I look like I've been here for 40 years, but it's only been 9, so a little over 8, really. But 33 years with the Sheriff's Office in Seattle, and part of my time working in the Sheriff's Office, I worked on the Green River serial murder case. You might imagine the number of young people that the task force members came in contact with, children who ran away from home for all kinds of reasons, unimaginable treatment sometimes in the homes that they ran from, ending up on the street, ending up in foster homes, from one foster family to another foster family, running away again, out on the street. And the detectives, one of the things that I'd like to make clear for the record back in the 80s when we were working this case, cared so much that they gave their home phone numbers to these children on the streets. And you probably know some police officers in your own community that care that much and accept those phone calls. And in the middle of the night, I can remember myself driving out to meet a child who said, I don't want to be out here, but I just ran away from my foster home. I have nowhere to go. I can't be who I want to be. They couldn't get adopted. They were 14, 15, 16. It was a sad experience. But we were able to help some of those young people. I get calls today still from some of those mostly young women who I met during that time who have grown to be educated, successful, and have a family. So there's always good stories to share with folks. Thank you all for what you do, and I now yield to Mr. Davis for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Either fortunately or unfortunately, Mr. Doggett cannot be here today, the ranking member for this subcommittee, and he asked if I would read his opening statement. Children in foster care have the same needs, desires, and dreams of all children. They need a safe and loving home, and they want and deserve the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to fully experience life. Our foster care system is rightly focused on trying to keep kids safe. But safety can't be the only goal we pursue. Children in foster care deserve the opportunity to join in the activities that help young people gain confidence and maturity. But too many foster youth encounter a no-entry sign when it comes to competing in a sport, or going on a field trip, or working in a part-time job. Some foster youth can't even spend the night at a friend's house unless they ask their friend's parents to first undergo a criminal background check. These barriers further isolate kids who already feel isolated. Hopefully, this hearing will allow us to examine the policies and practices that unduly prevent foster youth from joining in the activities that other children take for granted. But helping foster youth experience the same things other kids do sometimes require more than just granting them permission. Starting a savings account, applying to college, and getting a driver's license often requires some guidance and our financial assistance. Additionally, if we want to empower foster parents to make more decisions for the children in their care, we should review the supports we give to foster parents, as well as our efforts to improve the recruitment and retention of caring parents. No policy will ever affect a child as much as a committed, caring, and informed parent. Finally, to promote more normalcy for older foster youth, we need to push every state to extend foster care to the age of 21. I've never met a parent who sends their child out the door without any support when they turn 18. But that was the policy of our foster care system for far too long. About 20 states have now taken advantage of a change in federal law to extend foster care, and it's past time for the rest of the states to catch up. Investing in the success of our foster children is not only good for them, but it will also reduce unemployment, homelessness, teenage pregnancy, incarceration, and other negative outcomes that cost society much, much more. So, Mr. Chairman, with this committee taking the lead, Congress has made some progress in recent years in ensuring that a child's well-being is a central goal of the foster care system. I look forward to working with you to continue that trend so that every other foster child, has an opportunity to succeed. I thank you for this hearing. I thank all of the witnesses for coming to participate, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you for standing in for Mr. Doggett. Mr. Doggett had a choice between being with the President of the United States or Mr. Davis and myself. So, but he, I know Mr. Doggett really cares about this issue, and you can tell from the words that Mr. Davis read on his behalf that he is passionate about this, and appreciate his work and Mr. Davis's. And this committee really has a close working relationship. So hopefully we can find a way to help our children across this country. So without objection, each member will have the opportunity to submit a written statement and have it included in the record at this point. And I want to remind our witnesses to please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. However, without objection, all of the written testimony will be made a part of the permanent record today. On our panel this morning, we'll be hearing from the Honorable Nancy Dietert, Florida Senate, Talitha James Foster, Youth Fellow Kid Save, Irene Clements, President, National Foster Parent Association, David Wilkins, Secretary, Florida Department of Children and Families, and Tanya Wilkins, Advocate for Foster Care and Adoption, Governor's Office of Adoption and Child Protection, Lynn Teedy, Senior Associate Director for Policy, Jim Casey, Youth Opportunities Initiative. We are also pleased to be joined by another Ways and Means member this morning, Representative Buchanan from Florida. Mr. Buchanan would like to introduce a couple of our witnesses today. Mr. Buchanan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this very important hearing. I was back a couple of years ago and at a Boys and Girls Club, and they said children make up 25% of the population, 100% of the future. So I want to thank not just our chairman and the members here today, but I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. I've hung on to that because really at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So I really appreciate all the hard work that you do here. It's an honor this morning to introduce my dear friend from Florida, State Senator Nancy Dietert. I've known and admired her for over 10 years. She's been an incredible senator. She's a tireless worker with a passion for public service, fighting every day to better the lives of her constituents. And I might add, just this week, I noticed that she had the highest rating from our papers in terms of Florida finishing its legislative session. I think she got an A+, and that's the grade I would give her as well. Now, I should warn the committee that Nancy has a reputation in Florida for not mincing words. I mean, she's very direct, very blunt. That's what I love about her, but she's going to tell you like it is. I hope my colleagues will take her words to heart today, as I will. Also from Florida, we've got two special guests, Mr. Chairman, and it's my pleasure to introduce from Florida David and Tanya Wilkins. David and Tanya are an incredible husband and wife team, and that's exactly what they are. My wife was telling me they were on a mission trip together a while back, so I know that where their heart's at in terms of the work they're doing. David is a very dynamic secretary of the Florida Department of Children and Family with a wealth of experience in both the private and the public sector, while Tanya is a tireless supporter for foster care and adoption. And I think you have some of your children, or some of them are adopted foster children. David and Tanya were the recipient of the 2012 Daniel Webster Healthy Families Florida Leadership Award in recognition of their work on behalf of Florida's most at-risk children. We are lucky to have them here today, and I look forward to their testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Senator Dietert, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chairman Reichert and members of the subcommittee. Thank you, Congressman Buchanan, for your kind words. I'm honored and thank you for the opportunity to participate in the hearing today. I'm Nancy Dietert, a state senator from Florida. I served in the House from '98 to 2006 and was elected to the Florida State Senate in 2008. In all those years, I've always served on the Committee for Children and Family and have chaired it on occasion. So foster care is an issue that I've dealt with for many, many years. Our foster care system historically has been focused on safety concerns and liability. We felt that our main purpose was to protect these children, to take them from unsafe homes and make sure they were safe. But in our quest to make them safe, what we have done is bubble wrap these kids and deprive them of any kind of normalcy when it comes to childhood. We have designed a system where they have to check with their caseworker over every move, things as simple as getting a haircut. So we succeeded in protecting them, but we deprived them of a life. Foster parents have concerns about safety, they have concerns about liability, but children typically miss many rites of passage common to their peers. While their friends are getting a driver's license, most children in care are not, because they generally have no one to teach them to drive or lack the money for insurance. They don't have parents that can even sign for insurance. Getting a first job, participating in sports, camping out with friends, even going to the prom are activities that are a normal part of growing up, but not common for children in our care. The issue of normalcy for children in foster care has been addressed in the past, and we promulgated rules in 2004. We made rules to solve all of these problems, but we have gone to community-based care, and not everyone was following the rules. So this year, we decided that former secretaries have also issued memoranda and did everything they could to make people follow the rules, but they didn't. So under our new Secretary of DCF, Secretary Wilkins, who we're very pleased to have, he's a secretary who understands the issues and has seen them firsthand and cares. So the current Department of Children and Family Services implemented 2 surveys to gather data related to independent living services and outcomes. The surveys captured information from children 13 to 17 and from those who have aged out from 18 to 22. And these are their findings. The children report that 66% are able to spend time with friends without adult supervision. 46% can spend the night with friends. 53% receive a personal allowance, which is one of our rules, so they can learn to manage small amounts of money, but that rule was not being implemented. 44% are allowed to go to school events, movies, shopping, and other unsupervised activities with friends. 14% have completed a driver's education course, and only 2% have a driver's license. I learned early in my legislative career that if you want to make a good law, you listen to the people who are affected by that law and try to implement the changes that they need, and we listen to the kids. In Florida, we are fortunate enough to have a group of older teens and young adults known as Florida Youth Shine. Youth Shine is a peer-driven organization that empowers young advocates across the state who regularly identify the challenges and help create solutions to our growing problems in our child welfare system. I just have a few seconds left, and I want to share 2 things that we learned in testimony. A young woman began by thanking the committee for allowing her voice to be heard. She said, "When you think of normalcy, you think of what everyone else is doing. When I think of normalcy, I think of going back and forth for court for orders to allow me to do things like going to a basketball game or spending the night. This is not normalcy. Our new bill changes these laws and codifies our rules, and we hope to have some time to tell you about the laws that we passed this past session." Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. James, 5 minutes, please.
Just want to thank the committee for this opportunity to speak on behalf of former foster youth and current foster youth. My name is Talitha James, and I am a former CCAI intern. I had the opportunity to intern here on the Hill, as well as I'm a graduate from the California State University of Fullerton. My experience in care, I was placed in care at the age of 2. I emancipated at the age of 18. And my experience in care was not that great. And I know that a lot of youth have the opportunity to be placed in great homes, but I did not have that opportunity. I was placed in homes where I was not allowed to be myself, and I was not allowed to participate in sports. And the reason being was that one of the homes I was placed in, the foster parent pretty much told me that I should go to therapy instead of playing sports. And that was something that I held on to because I had a desire to play sports. And as you have all seen the picture that is being passed around, I was on the volleyball team at Lancaster High School when I was placed with my aunt. So at the age of 14, I was placed with my aunt, and my aunt took the initiative to just bypass all of the barriers that social workers put in place that don't allow foster youth to play sports. So she took it upon herself to allow me to play sports, and that pretty much changed my life. Me playing sports, I was allowed to learn what team development was all about. I was allowed the opportunity to, mess up and not be reprimanded for that. I was allowed to do a lot of things on that team that really helped me to develop personal skills. Now, prior to me being on that team, I was bounced around from homes to homes, and they did not see the importance of a foster child playing sports. And at that time as well, they also said there was no funding for me to play sports for me, or no funding for them to pay for a uniform. So that was another reason why I was not allowed to play sports. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of a lot of the barriers we put in place for foster youth to protect them, like we've heard, is a hindrance to their success as an adult. Had I not played on that team, a lot of the skills that I learned on that team I wouldn't have today. A lot of the, just the love for sports, the love for my coach that I developed on that team, I would not have today. So I just wanted to highlight that important piece. As well as when I was in care, I did not have the opportunity to receive rides from friends when I was going home. So I would have to walk to school and from school because my foster parents at the time did not want to drop me off at school. So we had to walk to school. And a lot of the times my friends would offer me the opportunity to have a ride home, but I had to explain to them that I couldn't. And so finally one of my friends asked me, she said, "Is everything okay? Are you okay?" And I just finally told her, I can't take the ride home because I'm a foster youth. And it didn't make sense to her. And she was just so confused. And for me, I understood because I knew the system, but she didn't understand the system. So that kind of showed me that that wasn't a normal thing for me not to be able to, receive a ride from a friend on my way home. So those are just the few things I wanted to highlight about my experience in care. And lastly, there was an opportunity for me to spend the night at a friend's house. And because they did not have time to complete a background check and all those things that you have to do in order for a child who is in foster care to spend the night, they did not have time to do that. And so my best friend, again, she wanted me to spend the night, and I couldn't do so. And finally, the family, my best friend's family, followed through on the requirements of completing a background check and doing all they needed to do so that I could spend the night. And unfortunately, because they had a pool that was raised above ground and it did not have a fence around it, I ultimately could not spend the night at the friend's house. So it's a lot of barriers in place, and we can't tackle them all, but I appreciate this opportunity to address the things that we can tackle, which I think is the normalization of the experience of foster youth in care. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here and all the struggles that you've gone through. And today, here you are testifying in front of the United States Congress. Congratulations on your upcoming career.
Thank you.
Ms. Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Reichert and members of the subcommittee for this opportunity. My name is Irene Clements, and I'm president of the National Foster Parent Association. For the last 43 years, the National Foster Parent Association has shared the subcommittee's quest to evaluate and elevate and dramatically improve the foster family services that our members provide to children for whom the government has assumed temporary and all too often long-term responsibility, as well as we serve as the national voice of foster parents. My husband and I fostered for 27 years, and during that time we fostered 127 children and adopted 4 of those children. During our tenure as foster parents, we fostered children of all ages. However, the last 12 years were dedicated to youth 14 and over. While we know a lot of well-meaning legislation has been passed since 1991, we still have a system that's not working well for the children it was designed to serve. Children experience too many placement disruptions. They're often not placed with siblings. They're often placed too far from their biological parents to have effective and frequent visits or remain in their school. They're frequently not involved in decisions made on their behalf or attend court. Some children experience unneeded medications, and they often feel singled out as different. I'm going to use a couple of examples that I put in my testimony to explain kind of the situation about what children experience, but also the frustrations of the foster parents because of the system. I'm going to use an example of Mary, who's an 11-year-old child in foster care. She was a member of the 4-H club in her small town. She wanted to take sewing lessons really bad. They were every week on Thursday after school, and there were 4 little girls in her class. The 4-H leader who taught the classes had been a leader for many years and provided those lessons in her home. Mary's foster mother was told that Mary could not attend these sewing classes until the 4-H leader and any others living in her home who were over the age of 14 had criminal background checks. Mary didn't understand why the other 3 little girls could go into this home and have sewing lessons when she couldn't. Why was it okay for her peers when she couldn't do it? Bottom line was that Mary's foster mother said, if I could, I would have stayed there and supervised each week for 2 hours on Thursday, but I had commitments with 2 other children, one to take to karate class and one to pick up from band practice. And because of the family not wanting to get everybody in the family to have background checks because they might come home before the class was over, Mary wasn't allowed to be in sewing class. So she lost interest in 4-H. She dropped out. She stopped going to anything. And she became just so discouraged. And, you know, she wanted to know, and she kept asking, why do my friends get to go but I can't go? What's the difference? Then an example of John, who's a freshman in high school, and he made the freshman football team, really, really proud of himself, and is keeping his grades up so he can play. His foster mother always picked him up from practice every day, and occasionally his foster father, but his foster father traveled some for work and wasn't available all the time. And one particular day, John's foster mother had a medical emergency with John's sibling, who was also in her home, and they were at the hospital. She couldn't pick John up from football practice, and her husband wasn't home, so she called the coach and asked him if he could take John home. John, in his service plan, had the ability to be home in the home for 3 hours without supervision. The coach said he couldn't do it because of something else he had to do, but he would get one of John's friends to his parents to take him home. Well, that occurred. Foster mother got home with the other child in about 2 hours, and everything was fine. A couple of days later, the children's caseworker came, and they were discussing the hospital visit and then how John got home from football practice. Immediately, the caseworker said, well, you've broken many rules in this. Let me call my supervisor to see if I have to remove these children from your home because you obviously did not supervise these children and made a bad decision on their behalf. Thank God the supervisor said, no, let's investigate a little bit further before you rip these kids out of this placement where they're doing very well. This family is not going to continue to foster, and they're a really good family. They've done really good work with a lot of kids. But they're so frustrated at the system that won't allow kids to have a normal life and for emergencies to come up and that not maybe have any understanding of that some of the times these things happen and the outcomes can be all right. And just to conclude, just briefly, that the National Association is literally looking forward to working with Congress to help make normalcy a reality. And we'll work diligently with foster parents around the country to help them trust that this move from risk aversion to a system that embraces normalization is real. Safety plus opportunity equals well-being, and that's where we need to go with each of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Wilkins. And Ms. Wilkins, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Reichert and members of the subcommittee and Congressman Buchanan. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this issue that's so near and dear to all of our hearts. And as we previously mentioned, I'm the Secretary of the Florida Department of Children and Families, and Tanya, my wife, is the Governor's Chief Advocate for Foster Care and Adoption. Tanya is a registered nurse. I worked for a global management consulting technology company for 30 years. We don't have a lot of experience in government, but our private sector experience and our experience raising our own 3 daughters And our volunteer experience in fostering children in our home, I think, has given us a unique perspective of what are the issues. And we're here today to really tell you that the bill that we passed in the Florida legislature this session is something I think every state in the union could benefit from. You've heard testimony from Senator Dieter talking about some of the challenges and some of the numbers of why children fell in foster care, and you've heard some of the other testimony about just some of the, no other word but bizarre rules and processes that have evolved into the foster care system over the years. You know, all these statistics have point out that the success of children in foster care is simply not adequate. And on further analysis, a large reason of these inadequacies is the related failures of our foster parenting system. Our foster parenting population in our state has dropped over 15% over the last 3 years. Not surprisingly, group home care has risen in that same time frame. Upon surveying many of these parents, we were told that the frustrations are extremely high. And you heard some of the testimony there. Foster parents are burdened with paperwork, court responsibilities, a list of job responsibilities, all centered around protecting the child. And the result is obvious. We're not letting kids be kids, and we're not giving the parents the permission to parent. So a culture change was needed in our state to, in essence, permeate the entire system with the information that normalcy in foster care is the most paramount goal. Parents of our children's families do not need to be background screened for sleepovers. Young people should be able to go to church activities without a licensed foster parent, and children should be included in all social and extracurricular activities. Having seen the need for these types of changes, we launched 3 key initiatives in the state of Florida. One was around performance management of our provider network. We now believe that measuring performance is central to promoting accountability. We developed a performance scorecard that measures contracted foster care agencies on 11 performance measures to determine how well they are meeting the most critical needs of our children. Since the first scorecard was produced over a year ago, we have improved performance by over 25%. We also initiated a whole initiative around normalcy, as Senator Dieter mentioned. We issued open letters to demand normalcy in all of our foster parents and provider organizations. We developed media campaigns, and we issued social networking policies to basically say, you know, children can have access to the internet. And as you all know, I think every child has to have access to Facebook. That's a new requirement in our children. So this bill is actually absolutely key to our success. But another key initiative that we knew we had to have was an initiative we called Fostering Florida's Future. And Tanya will address what we tried to accomplish there.
Good morning, Chairman Reichert, Congressman Davis, members of the subcommittees. Thank you for allowing me to speak to your committee about the Fostering Florida's Future initiative. Recognizing that Florida needs additional quality foster parents and families who can provide safe and loving homes to children in need, we launched the Fostering Florida's Future initiative in June of 2012. This is a collaboration with our 20 community-based care organizations throughout the state, with Guardian Ad Litem, the Florida State Foster and Adoptive Parent Association, Quality Parenting Initiative, local associations, and many others. When the governor appointed me as a statewide advocate, I had no idea how it would change our lives and touch our lives. We have been a sponsor family for foster children, teenage girls primarily, from a residential group home in Tallahassee. We served them, and as we served them, we would listen to their stories. It was heart-wrenching, the stories that they told us at night when they were tucking them in at bed at night, and I had to listen to their stories, and we would say prayers. The neglect and abuse that they had endured, and yet a blessing that we knew we could help empower them to overcome and have a future. We parented them as we would our own, much like the hundreds of foster parents that I've been fortunate to meet. Based on these learnings, we landed on an action plan for our Fostering Florida's Future initiative. We developed an awareness campaign with a website, videos, and social media. We created a recruitment campaign to find 1,200 new foster families, quality foster families for our children, and we are on track to reach that goal by June of 2013 this year. We are improving training for foster parents through the Quality Parenting Initiative, using trauma-informed care principles, focusing on awareness on attachment disorders, and we have simplified the licensing process. Fostering Florida's Future is showing great success in building enthusiasm and getting people interested in fostering and making a difference in these children's lives. But most of all, it is helping to provide long and caring families that these vulnerable children need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Teedy.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to be part of today's hearing on letting kids be kids. I thank the committee to be here, and I commend you for inviting Talitha to give testimony as well. We know firsthand that results are always better when young people that have experienced foster care are involved in the conversations. I am the policy director with Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative, a national foundation named in memory of the founder of United Parcel Service, UPS. We are focused solely on helping states and communities assist older youth in foster care in making successful transitions to adulthood. In fact, this hearing is very timely. Just this week, Jim Casey launched a national campaign, Success Beyond 18, which promotes state policies supportive of normalcy for older youth and young adults in foster care. Based on our experiences working in communities across 16 states, partnering with youth leadership boards, we have encountered many, if not all, of the barriers that you've heard about today. A key underpinning of the Jim Casey approach is the knowledge we now have about adolescent brain development. This science provides compelling evidence on why these normal experiences are so vitally important, especially as young people reach their teenage years. States have already begun to apply this knowledge. The two critical things to know about adolescent brain development is that adolescence is a time of profound brain development paralleling that of early childhood. The brain is not done developing at 3 or 6 as previously believed. Secondly, the impact of trauma on the brain is not permanent. Through adolescence and early adulthood, the brain can alter its structure in response to positive experiences and positive relationships. What does this mean? It means that adolescence is a time rich in opportunity and potential to help young people overcome adversity, overcome trauma through positive experiences like those normal experiences we're talking about today, like playing on a sports team. It has done for us in many ways what the research on early childhood brain development did. It tells us that what families typically and naturally do is what is right. How do we act on this knowledge? We do this through letting kids be kids, which inherently involves a degree of risk. Any parent knows that and has lost sleep over it. Yet we also know that gearing our kids towards these kinds of normative risks and healthy relationships will mean that they are less likely to engage in more dangerous risks and unhealthy relationships. We summarize talking to young people, they summarize the barriers that they face on a day-to-day basis, and you've heard about them today. Not being engaged in normal every day-to-day activities, internalizing a culture of no after hearing no again and again and again, and just wanting normal family experiences like a family vacation. From our efforts in states to normalize foster care, we've seen progress that can be built upon. One area you've heard about today, policies must explicitly support kids in foster care being involved in normal activities. I commend the folks here from Florida for your work in this area. We also need to reduce reliance on congregate care as it poses inherent challenges to normalcy. There are two more promising areas that I'd like to highlight. First, we must also promote opportunities because it's not enough just to remove barriers. This includes empowering foster parents and other caregivers with decision-making ability, training, and support, as also was mentioned. It also includes supporting specific opportunities that are age-appropriate. For example, financial skills. Financial skills are one of the things that young people report as most lacking when they leave foster care. Jim Casey, with our partners, implement the Opportunity Passport, which provides young people with opportunities to earn money and save in a matched savings account. We have shown that young people can and will save money, and they learn financial management skills along the way. Why has it worked? Because it provides what most families do for their teenagers and young adults. Real-life experiences, managing and saving money for things that the young people care about and that will help them on their path to adulthood, like a car to go to work and school or a computer for college. The second and critically important area is to ensure that young people are not only engaged in speaking out, as Talitha has today and is important, but are also engaged while in foster care in decisions about their lives. Too often, young people in foster care have never been asked, what interests you? What were you involved in before foster care? Or what would you like to do? Engaging young people in their case planning, where decisions about their life are made, is no different than a family sitting around the kitchen table talking with their teenager about the upcoming school year and planning what activities they want to be involved in. It's merely starting from the same place families do, which is what about you is special, rather than where we too often start in the child welfare system, which is what about your life went wrong. States are moving in this direction, but more can be done, promoting clarity in state policies, incentivizing placements in homes, in family homes, with appropriate training and supports, incentivizing experience-based opportunities, and revisiting the federal case planning framework and guidance to be modeled on the best practices we've learned in states. In conclusion, we should not be surprised that when we do not let kids be kids, we do not let them have normal experiences and grow up as most kids do, that they continue to face barriers well into adulthood. At Jim Casey, we know that we can do better. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the committee.
Well, thank you all for your testimony, and thank you for being here. So the first part of the hearing, of course, was your testimony, and the second part of the hearing will be some questions. So I know the members of the subcommittee are anxious to ask questions. I think of I was a foster grandfather for a number of years until my daughter and her husband adopted 2 children, and they're drug-addicted babies. And watching, they were 3 months old when they were adopted, and, well, taken in as foster children, and then finally adopted, but they're 10 and 11 now. And they're playing soccer. She's a painter. Breyer is a soccer player. But they have a good, solid foundation. One of the first the first hearing that this subcommittee had was looking at how we can move foster children to adoptive homes more quickly, creating it's sort of a preventative move, creating that solid foundation that Aletha that you missed, and we're working on that. So my question is, what can we do to help? The federal government, I mean, you hear all the time, we're from the federal government and we're here to help. and I know when I was the sheriff and the FBI came and told me that, I ran the other way. I hope there aren't any FBI agents in the audience this morning. But we really do want to assist you in letting kids be kids, and that's why we're holding this hearing. Can you think of some way that the federal government can play a role? And then secondly, is there any federal law that you can think of that's causing states to react in the way that they are? I understand liability is a huge issue, but is there any federal law that's really causing the states to have a reaction and limiting the activity of foster youth? Senator?
I kind of thought you might ask something like that. I do the same thing. They always blame it on government, but is government really the problem?
Right.
It's really a mindset, and it starts at the federal government and it goes down, and the mindset was safety, and we just need to change the emphasis to permanency and to normalcy. So if the federal government would just rearrange its way of thinking, which is what we've had to do in Florida as we wrote this law, what we're doing is changing the dynamic, empowering foster parents so they can behave more like real parents, and change the dynamic in the relationship. The relationship under current laws is that kid and their caseworker, and the caseworker turns over every 18 months, and they have less of a relationship with the foster parents. So my vision is you have more of a relationship with your foster parents, empower the foster parents, free them up from some liability, for normal decision making, and break that cycle where the kid has to go to court for everything. And we're the lawmakers, and we're the ones that make those rules and regulations. And so if we could just change the way we think and just say, does this make the kids' life easier or harder? One of the things in meeting with so many of these foster kids, and this girl's probably a prime example, they're so calm and patient. And I think that probably comes from years of waiting for their caseworker or sitting in court waiting for a decision. Mm-hmm. They're certainly not usually hyperactive. So it's more of a mindset than a law.
Can I ask Talitha real quick? You grew up knowing the system. I grew up in the sheriff's office knowing the system in an entirely different way, watching young people like yourself move through the system. Is it mostly local law, state law, federal law? Did you get into it that deeply, or you just knew you were under the law, a law?
You're speaking of while I was in care.
Yes.
Yes, so when you're in care, when you're in the thick of it, all you know is the system, whether
Right.
it be state, federal, but mainly I knew the system to be the social workers. So it wasn't a matter of legislation or
Right.
law, but it was the social workers because I had face-to-face contact with those individuals who were making my life a miserable hell. So.
Yeah. Now, as you look back, what do you see specific laws that?
I wanted to touch on a point where you asked what can be done, and I feel like the social workers are the ones who are being scrutinized because they have liability as well. So I think it needs to be addressed at that level as well, because a social worker can only make a decision based on the grounds that they're given. And then they put those same barriers upon the foster parents. I think that needs to be addressed. And there's so many social workers who would rather check off the box that they're doing their job versus, am I really doing this for the care, the good of the child? So that needs to be addressed. And also you asked about how can we move more older youth into permanent homes, which I did not have the option to be adopted, or not the option, I was not adopted when I was in care.
Yeah.
But there is a program that I work for called Kids Save, and we have a Week in Miracles program, and we help to get older youth in foster care, or from foster care in adoptive homes through hosting. So we have a program where you're able to host a child for a year, get to know them naturally, and then these families are able to adopt them because they know them naturally. They get to work out the kinks of building a relationship that most adopted families don't have the opportunity to do so because they're given the child without any experience. So I think that is a great program, and we have an 80% success rate if you want to look at us. So.
Well, with you involved, we know it's going to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Clements, did you have a quick comment?
Yes, sir, I did. We currently have the Child and Family Services reviews that every state goes through every 4 years, and those are built on safety, health, and well-being when you look at the outcome performance measures that states are supposed to meet. And we know the states are not meeting those very well historically over the last 2 rounds. But we already have a mechanism through that CFSR review where we address well-being, and that's where normalcy fits in. And so I think if we would relook or review those outcome performance measures that are in the CFSR review and maybe put some teeth into them, more emphasis into that, maybe less on the safety part because, hopefully we've got that down pretty well across the country, but use a tool we already have, a system we already have in place, so that when these reviewers come out and visit the states every 4 years, they'll be looking more in depth at the well-being. And so if states aren't doing a very good job at that, then they're going to have to do their program improvement plan back to the feds about how they're going to improve that over the next 2 years until their next CFSR review. I think if our mechanism is there, it's just reviewing what the content of those performance measures are to make sure that they're in line with this way of thinking. And then the other piece that is probably local or state and then local, depending on how child protection systems are set up. And some states are state-run, some are county-run. So we have lots of different people making rules and regulations and setting standards, especially for foster homes and what they can and can't do, and what they can allow children to do and not do, is the whole piece of the liability. We have immunity for our state employees, and in my state where I live in Texas, you can't even get liability insurance for a foster parent. Nobody wants to do that. Right. Foster parents are investigated over so many things, and one example was a little boy that the foster mom was standing 4 feet from him. He was climbing a tree. He's 9 years old, and there was 3 other little boys at his little birthday party, and they were climbing this tree. He fell, and he broke his arm, and, of course, Murphy's Law, Well, they got a full-blown investigation for child abuse, and he just fell out of the tree. I mean, it was an accident, but he was climbing. He was having fun with his friends. And so the foster family had the children removed from their home. You know, they went through this kind of stuff. They were in fear that, will the birth parents bring a lawsuit against us, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Those are the realities of care. And so how are we take the time to change the systems from risk of adverse, like I said, to something that embraces taking risks so children can have normalcy?
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask for your response in writing because I've gone way over my time and my committee members are going to really get upset with me. So, Mr. Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. James, let me ask you, and I commend you, first of all, for your personal development, the way that you navigated the system, and for being who you are and where you are at this point. Do you think you would have gone to college necessarily had you not been able to express your interest in athletics?
I would say I would not have gone to college had my aunt not cared for me at the age of 14, and her guidance is what got me to where I am today. So had she not taken me in, I would not have been able to play sports. I would not have been able to graduate high school. Only 3% of foster youth graduate high school, 1% then go on to graduate college. So she set me up for a lot of things when she took me into her care. So I give all the credit to her and to God, of course.
Well, thank you very much. I think that she is indeed an angel, and there are many angels like her. The community that I live in has a great deal of interest, concern, and engagement in child welfare issues. As a matter of fact, my congressional district has more children who live with someone other than their natural parents than any other congressional district in America. And the district that is adjacent to mine is number 2 in terms of children living with someone other than their natural parents. We have every kind of program that one can imagine. The state of Illinois has a good system, and I commend them for their forward thinking. One of the areas that we have difficulty with, though, is recruiting foster parents for teenaged young people. That seems to be a big problem for us. We've got programs where foster children living with grandparents, or where grandparents are raising grandchildren, but finding foster parents for teenagers. Secretary and Ms. Wilkins, could you all address, because I am tremendously excited about your success in this area, how you really get foster parents for teenagers.
Well, thank you. I agree it is a major challenge, and fortunately or accidentally, Tanya and I, the children we fostered were teenagers, so we jumped right in as well. But what we've tried to do in Florida is look at the recruitment of foster parents as a major imperative and a focus area. And my simple business background says, you know, you get what you measure and you get what you focus on. And so what we said is, just in general, if we're going to create this normalcy initiative, then we have to raise the bar on foster parents. And so we need to expect more out of foster parents, and so because they have to do all these things we talked about in terms of getting the kids to soccer practice and, you know, demanding performance and academics on the children and all those kind of things. So, you know, we've really looked at creating literally just a private sector marketing program, going after people differently and telling people that foster parenting, it's not like your father's Oldsmobile. You know, foster parenting today is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. And so you know, we're looking for those families who really wanted to dedicate their lives. And what we're finding in Florida is they are there. And what we need to do is go outside the normal channels, you know, reach out to the faith communities, reach out to other NGOs, and reach out to private businesses to partner with us on these types of things, and it can be accomplished.
When we started taking foster children in our home, you know, everybody thought we were crazy. You know, they think that foster children come with all of this baggage, that they're bad kids. They are kids from tough places. And when we showed up the same place, church, wherever, about the 16th time, people would say, "You're okay, and you still have these children?" And I said, "Absolutely." And as people get to know the children, they will realize that there's so many decisions that they make are fear-based. They're scared to death. These children have been moved and moved and moved. There's nothing stable in their life. So if you understand that, which is part of our training for new foster parents and for older ones that want to stay there, if you understand that about the children that we deal with, there's normal adolescent behavior, there's normal childhood behavior, and then there's trauma, and that's going to be a fear-based behavior. So in that, if you explain that, you will reach those people that have the heart to care, but then also will be equipped to be able to do that. So as David said, I've dragged him all over the state of Florida in recruitment. And when people hear the message and the awareness of the need, when we go to a community and say, in this community in Tallahassee, when we presented to them and said, we have no one in this Tallahassee area that will take a teenage girl, we had probably 50 people that responded and said, I will do it from my heart. So you have to, David calls drinking the Kool-Aid, you have to get them the awareness out there and talk about these children, that they're children that want to be loved and cared for. And if you get out there and tell that and spread that kind of message, so there's marketing plans, and then there's getting to the people and telling them what you really need. And it's working in Florida. It's exciting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Renacci, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you for holding this hearing, and I want to thank all the witnesses for your testimony. It's been a learning experience, I know, for me, and listening to all of you and reading your testimony. One thing I've learned in looking into some details in Ohio, which is the state I represent, 12,000 Ohio children are living in foster care each month. Last year, more than 1,500 foster children aged out of care when they turned 18. You know, when I hear these statistics, I think about whether or not the system has really prepared the young adults to become successful in their adulthood. Our job as their representatives should be to set them up for success, not to make their lives more difficult. I understand there are states like my home state of Ohio that have begun to lessen the barriers for foster youth to engage in normal activities. One thing I heard today was a lot of discussion about Florida and some of the things Florida has done. And Senator Detter, as a legislator, what did it take to get Florida interested in changing their current foster system?
Oh, thank you for that question. A friend of mine who gives me simple but startling advice once said, first you have to care. And years ago, I had a foster girl. I mean, it's really not on anybody's radar. And when you talk about the subject to your colleagues and to groups, they say, I had no idea, because none of us have any idea. And what got to me was a foster care girl walked into my office when I chaired children and family in the House, and she said, why does the state of Florida keep screwing with my life? And I said to her, we spend millions of dollars to do that to you. Why don't you sit here and tell me how we can spend millions of dollars to fix your life? And she went through her list, which was legitimate. I've been moved 4 times. My whole goal is just get out of foster care. You're not helping me. You're not doing anything. She was turning 18. She was going to go in the Army. So my staff, I told them, sit down with this girl and make a list and see what we can fix. And it's simple things. Don't move them in the middle of their school year and make them repeat a whole year. This is not helping. So because of that girl, that year we did a bill that I sponsored, and I named it the Road to Independence, which covered foster care kids from 18 to 21, because we found when they left foster care, they were ending up homeless or in jail. They've grown up with no family support, nothing there for them. So under that piece of legislation, which we used with your federal dollars, thank you, Those kids, as long as they were in community college, university, or any kind of school that would get you a job, we would give them a small monthly stipend. So I did that bill probably 10, 15 years ago. 2008, I got elected to the Senate. I was not thinking of serving on that committee anymore, but I signed up for it. And who came back but all those kids that originally were in the Road to Independence program, and now they are grown-ups and they help other foster kids, and it's just been thrilling. So really, first you have to care, you have to tell your colleagues, you have to take an interest. We pass laws, and then we have to survey and see, are they working?
Yeah. Well, thank you for caring, and I do want to thank the other witnesses because I know there's a lot of caring at that table as well. Mrs. Clements, you know, I heard in testimony a lot of discussion about breaking the rules, and I guess I'd like to find out a little more about that. What would be the repercussions for guardians should they break a rule with the foster child?
Well, there are set standards that every home has to follow, and you're supposed to be in 100% compliance with all those standards that are set up by your individual state or county on what it takes to be a foster parent. They're very restrictive and almost make families have to act like little institutions because they have to be so restrictive on the kids. And when either the private agency that you're foster for or the state licensing people come out and they look at that you're not following the rules. And the example I used about the foster mother who had an emergency at the hospital with another child and couldn't go pick up her foster son from football practice. Not only did she get in trouble because the coach didn't have a background check, but the parent who brought the child home didn't have a background check, as well as neither one of them did they have a copy of the automobile insurance for those people. That's how nitpicky it gets. Yeah. So you get investigated because you've broken those rules. And there's so many of them that you have to back off and you can't let kids do anything.
Thank you. I know I've run out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Unfortunately, we're going to be called to go vote in a few minutes. So we would like to continue the hearing, but if the members could be more poignant in their questions, we can go vote. Mr. Reed is recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for coming today. And I do want to publicly acknowledge some work by a colleague of mine who's not a member of the committee but is here today, a good friend of mine, the gentle lady from California. And this is a Republican publicly applauding a Democrat on the other side of the aisle because she's a tireless advocate for this area and adoption, and I applaud her for those efforts. And this is one of those moments where you don't get a lot of good testimony down here many a days. But Ms. Janes, Ms. Wilkins, hearing your testimony makes me proud to sit here and hear it. So my hat is tipped to you. One of the things I want to kind of focus on a policy basis is we've passed some legislation here recently on the federal level, 2008, 2013, some acts. And one of the concerns I always have when we act federally, we sometimes think that one size fits all as to this issue. And I would be very interested in knowing from maybe Ms. Clements, Mr. Wilkins, and the state senator, is this an area that really a one size fits all federal standard could address, or is this something that we should give the discretion to the states to try to deal with on a state-by-state basis? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Secretary?
Well, great question. One of the reasons Florida has been able to, quote, turn around their system over the last 8 years is because you guys granted the state of Florida a waiver in our child welfare system. And in that waiver, we have now more flexibility of, in essence, how to spend the money. And so we have then been able to move more of our costs to the front end of the system, and we're continuing on a journey on that to really focus more on prevention types of activities. And I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, if you look at just at the mathematical progress that Florida has made over the last 8 years, it's a model that other states could benefit from. Now, how Florida did it doesn't necessarily is not, probably there isn't even not even a one size fits all. And I think because other states are coming from different places and would go after an implementation differently. But I would definitely encourage, giving more waivers to states. But going back to a comment Irene made too, is continuing to hold states accountable for outcomes, not process results. And we still get a lot of federal government reporting and measurements based on process. It doesn't matter how many kids we have, it's the progress of those children, right? And so, and if we do that, then people don't get as obsessed about following all the rules and procedures because it's not about process. Instead, it's about making the right decisions for kids.
Ms. Clements, want to offer?
Completely agree with the Secretary on that one.
So,
I do believe you have the system already in place through the Child and Family Service Reviews to look at the outcomes of these performance measures and let the states decide how they're going to do it. Because we all have a different personality out there depending on where we're from, and that's, I think, the key.
so if, Senator, I don't know if you want to offer anything, but.
No, I would agree with the Secretary on that.
So
Flexibility and accountability, and we're there.
Very good, because so then I generally am hearing let states have the flexibility and the federal government potentially have an accountability oversight type of role, and I appreciate that. Because the other issue that is out there is that we're hearing some great stories today, but we also, I've heard the horror stories of the 0.001% situation that needs to be recognized as we go through this, because God forbid, that occurs in the future, and we had an opportunity to do something about it. And so I just offer that as a kind of a sensitivity that I'm aware of, and that I'm trying to grapple with as we deal with this, giving flexibility, but at the same time making sure that accountability gets at that 0.1% situation that we've identified. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I appreciate the Chairman's hard work in this area, and I know he's personally committed to this area also.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. I think what I'm going to do is limit the time now to 3 minutes so that we can make sure that every member has an opportunity. Mr. Young's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. I'll try and speak quickly and ask you to perhaps respond pointedly to the questions I have. Common sense and the powerful testimony of people like Ms. James tell us that a certain amount of innovation at the state level is certainly helpful to our foster care population. That is evidenced not just by testimony but also by hard evidence, much of which we receive, as has been indicated, through the Child and Family Service Reviews. My first question would be to Ms. Wilkins and Senator Dieter, if you could speak to those reviews. Do you have any ideas for improvement with respect to those reviews?
To reviews by the federal government?
That's right.
Of the state?
That's right.
I think
you're on the receiving end of them, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, if you would do surveys of the kids aging out of foster care, and if they had an opportunity, one of the things that bothers them is they feel they're caught up in a whirlwind of a bureaucratic system and that they don't have a voice. So I would say surveying them and then looking at our results.
Okay. That sounds excellent. Got a minute 40 left. Very quickly on this because I have another question, please.
One thing that we did do was not have the government call the foster parents that had been in that situation before fostering, and so we had foster parents call foster parents that had quit fostering for whatever reason. So we specifically did that so that they would open up and say they're not going to open up to DCF or whatever. So we got a lot of information about what barriers there are, and then I spend a lot of time speaking with youth in under 18 and over in what held you back from where you want to go in life and all these things, and we bring them back. And I'm fortunate enough to live with this man, so I can kick him at home and say this is what needs to be changed in DCF or the system or whatever.
Briefly, we've got laboratories of democracy, so to speak, here. If we empower you to innovate, I think it would be helpful to other states to learn from your innovation. Perhaps they adopt some of your best practices. Perhaps they learn from worst practices and failed experimentation. Through what means or forum do you share such information? And can the federal government, to your mind, help facilitate such conversation and sharing of information either way? I'll give this to either of you that maybe has strong feelings. Senator?
Yes, what we found, that we're talking about our normalcy bill today, and it's very important in the lives of the kids, but we also did another huge bill that is yet to be signed by the governor, but he will sign it, extending foster care to age 21 for no new money. And the way we did that is to look at our budget and look at what we've privatized in community-based care and how many things are vendor-driven rather than child-driven.
But state-to-state conversation, it's just informal basis, is that right?
Yeah, and I would personally like to see more standardization on the accountability issues for states, because when we go and look at other states and try to understand who's doing something good, everybody measures things differently, and so it's very complicated. We do have some great organizations like all the different Casey organizations that try to help triangulate that, but better standardization on the accountability issues nationally would help.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here. My question, Ms. James, would be to you, because I don't think that most of us would realize the difficulty is participating in sports, and it wasn't until your aunt took you in that you're able to do it. I got to tell you, those life experiences, I mean, playing team sports is not about making the major leagues. It's about making a major difference in your life. And in every life is a journey, so those experiences. But tell me the difficulty. That's hard for me to understand. You know, growing up in a little town where I coached youth sports, and I want to talk to Mr. Young. He talks about his soccer days. Mr. Renacci talks about all the football and baseball and days he had, and of course, my friend Tom Reed was a great swimmer. But for you, huge difference in your life, was it not? Being able to have a common goal and a thing. Tell me, how tough was it though, and why couldn't you play when you were in a foster home?
Thank you for the question. I could not play prior to me being with my aunt because of the barrier of money. So a lot of foster homes, they did not want to pay an additional fee out of their pocket for me to pay for my uniform or just have money when we had a game out of town. So those were the things that prevented me from doing that, as well as taking me to practice. So a lot of the foster parents were not foster parents. They were bystanders in the process. But a lot of issues came about because you have to travel outside of your residence. So if I travel 100 miles outside of my residence, I would need county approval, or my social worker would have to sign off on it, and she would have to go to the courts to get that approved. So that was an issue until my aunt just said, this is nonsense. Yeah. I'm just going to do what I am going to allow you to do. So. Oh,
that's great. Now, did your aunt come and watch you play?
Absolutely, yes.
That's neat. You know what? We just passed a bill yesterday in the House that's going to allow comp time where people can actually go and watch their sons, their daughters, their nephews and nieces play, which I thought was a great piece. So I'm glad that happened to you. You know, Ms. Clements, you talk about Mary in 4-H. I was a 4-H'er, and I know it's about head, heart, health, and hands. And,
absolutely.
What another great experience. But if you are a foster child, you can't participate in 4-H?
Well, you can.
But?
Right, but everybody has to have a background check. You know, again, couldn't go to 4-H camp every summer. I mean, I went for 9 years, you know, to 4-H camp, the biggest deal of my life every time. Couldn't go because it was away. It was more than 150 miles away where the camp was. Had all these people there that were adults and kids over 14, where in my state they all had to have a background check if you're going to be around them more than a few hours. You couldn't do those things. Yeah. And it just totally ties the hands of the parents who are trying to take care of these kids and frustrates the children to the point where they have acting out behaviors. It's not that they're bad kids. They're just so darn frustrated with the system, and they don't trust anybody anymore to do their best interest.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you can mainstream them, and thank you for all being here. Ms. Wilkins, congratulations on the award. Private sector, you got to inspect what you expect. So you're seeing some changes. It's what you've done that makes a difference. Thank you all so much for being here, Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Lewis is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I will be very brief. I want to thank members of the panel for being here. Read some of your testimony. I apologize for not being here earlier. I was on the floor. But, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for holding this hearing, and thank Mr. Davis for being here, and for the other members. And I want to thank our colleague, Congresswoman Bass. Since she's been here, she's been a strong advocate, unbelievable spokesperson in the House on the Hill for foster care. So thank you. Ms. James, I had an opportunity to read your testimony, and I admire all of you for all of your work. The parents, Senator, for your leadership and your vision. Ms. James, I admire you for not giving up, for not giving in, for not becoming bitter or hostile, but for keeping the faith with a sense of direction and a sense of purpose. I noticed near the end of your testimony, you quoted Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King.
Absolutely.
I knew Dr. King. I met him when I was 18. I met Rosa Parks when I was 17. I grew up in a very large family, very, very poor. But individuals that I met and came in contact with inspired me and lifted me. And someone along the way in foster care, no doubt, lifted you. Mm-hmm. And you just kept the faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now you're back.
Well, if you're not inspired by that.
Let the church say amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Griffin, you're recognized.
And this Baptist says amen.
Amen.
I want to apologize for not being here earlier. I was on the floor with the highly esteemed Representative Lewis, and I appreciate his words. And it's always an honor to serve with a living legend and civil rights icon, and appreciate everything that he does. I just want to mention that there's a great program in Central Arkansas in Little Rock called The Call. You're shaking your head. Children of Arkansas Love for a Lifetime. I call it The Call. I can't remember the longer name. My wife and I have been learning about that through our church, Emmanuel Baptist Church. A lot of churches in Little Rock are working with The Call, which is a nonprofit. And the purpose of it is to just find some more foster parents. There are something like 7,000 children in Arkansas in any 1 year in foster care, and only 950 or so families. And so in addition to improving it, we've got to do more recruiting. But one of the things that really struck me that I want to get your input on is this is a nonprofit. It is a faith-based, Christ-centered organization with a lot of local churches in it. It's very open about that. But I've been really impressed that the top levels of leadership in our Arkansas Department of Health and Human Services Division of Children and Family Services have been active. It's described here as unprecedented cooperation between state government and these churches, which I think is fabulous. The churches are meeting a need that they believe, and I believe is part of our Christian mission, to love kids that need homes. And the government is saying this is helpful and is partnering. So I'm wondering, have you heard of this? Have you heard of similar cooperation between churches and the government and other states? Any of you want to comment on that in my very limited time?
Very quickly, I know that Commissioner Corrigan in Michigan has had a similar outreach. They are under a consent decree and needed to recruit, I think, 600 foster family homes within a year, I believe. And she called together all the faith-based organizations across the state and gave them a challenge. And last I heard that they are meeting that challenge.
So Michigan, any others?
Yes, sir. We have a faith-based initiative in Texas as well. And over 400 churches are participating at this point, and we're just in the beginning stages. Recruiting for foster parents, for adoptive parents, and for those who don't feel they can do that, how those congregations then can support those that can. Beautiful, beautiful programs.
Well, it seems to me it's a natural network of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, and millions of people ready to go to work for the same cause that the government has.
Well, we have 11 regions across the state, and the state, there's a state employee in each one that's called a faith-based initiative specialist. I mean, that's how dedicated the State Department is.
Awesome.
I just wanted to say a quick thing. I went to the Christian Alliance for Orphan conference last week. It was summit, and it was 4,000 faith-based leaders across the U.S. coming together to talk about this issue.
Awesome.
And so we had breakouts in government, Arkansas being one of them, and how they use the call. So I met them. I said, come to Florida. And we've got some great things going in Florida. We at DCF actually, he actually has hired a faith-based leader. He was a pastor.
Partnership, right? It's a partnership, yeah.
Partnership. I had to find my place. And so we brought him to DCF. And so he's actually meeting with pastors because they could do the pastor-to-pastor talk and talk about why wasn't it on his radar as a pastor. And so he's getting this. So we just were able to speak with Northland in Orlando. They have 20,000 members, and it simulcasts all over, right? And so we had 300 that responded to the call.
Awesome.
And so now they're going to nurture those through the church and coming alongside, and they're going to save the government tons and tons of money in the support that they get. Plus, it's going to be recruitment ongoing in that church.
It's exciting.
It's exciting.
Let me know what I can do to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, we wish we could listen to you all day. You really have a lot of excitement, a lot of knowledge, and good or bad, some experience in this arena. And I think what you'll find from this committee is a great passion and a devotion to trying to find a way, as I said earlier, to help our foster youth. There are members of Congress who have come from places that you may not really expect. And, of course, Mr. Lewis shared just briefly a little piece of his story from a large family from a poor neighborhood, and here he is, a member of Congress. I know Mr. Davis has had a similar experience. Myself, I grew up, I'm the oldest of 7, ran away from home when I was a junior and senior in high school and lived in my car, and a 1956 Mercury. I'll never buy another 1956 Mercury again in my life. But the reason I share that with all of you is that I hope that as you go back and you share, Ms. James, with the folks that you work with, your experience, there's opportunities. You're a very, very bright young lady.
Thank you.
You have a great future in front of you, and you know, your faith is one of the things that I know that I've used, that I know that you have relied on, and just appreciate all of you, all the hard work that you do, your testimony here today, and I'm sorry we had to cut it a little bit short, but that's sometimes the nature of Congress. So we're all going to go vote. We look forward to working with you. We are going to be probably sending you some questions, expecting some answers in writing, as I said earlier. If members have additional questions for the witnesses, they will submit them to you in writing, and we would appreciate receiving your responses for the record within 2 weeks. The committee stands adjourned. Thank you.
It's a pleasure working with you. Congratulations. I'm glad you're such a successful person.
Yes,